Great, thank you, Missy. Good morning, everybody. This is Monday, July 22nd. It's 10 a.m. in the morning, and I will call this meeting of the Port of Olympia Commission to order. Commissioner Basavado, would you please lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, we have an agenda before us. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve today's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of approving today's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
First up on our agenda items, Executive Director report. Executive Director Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Board President Isle. Okay, I'm going to keep this brief because there's a whole lot of substantive things for you all on the agenda today. So first of all, we had our last summer night at the Port concert a few weeks ago. It was a rollicking night out there, and thanks to everybody who came out and withstood the very hot weather. I think it was 90 degrees plus. But we concluded the series and we are looking forward to doing it again next year and hopefully even bigger and better. This year we had record attendance numbers, and we also really wanted to make sure we thanked our participating bands, our food vendors, and OB Credit Union for sponsoring the beer garden. All the Port staff were the ones who make sure these events happen, and our commissioners for coming out and leading the charge and opening up some of the concerts and making the summer nights at the Port such a great event. So again, we look forward to having people come out next year, and we're already planning for those. We had this past week, the Tumwater School District's Natural Resources Summer Program come and visit us at the Port. The students are enrolled in a class on forest and stream ecology and water resource management. They really appreciated getting the opportunity to learn all about the various port operations, projects, and initiatives, and we appreciate the Tumwater School District's continued partnership. I had the opportunity last week, I think it was, to go to the WPPA Executive Director Seminar down at the Port of Kalama. In addition to learning great things from my fellow executive directors, we got a chance to tour some of the Kalama facilities. And on the left is a cruise boat that is it's moored there. This is a view from the McMinimans Hotel, where which is another port property that they're making generating some revenue off of, and they've created a number of incredible amenities around the hotel. And on the right is we did a tour of some of the facilities that operate on port property, and this is a company that manufactures wine bottles, and it was a really cool operation to see and learn about. So it was very fun. I also wanted, before providing opportunities for input, just wanted to mention that we have a new port employee today, Karen Andrade, who is here. She's our new environmental communication specialist, and Karen comes to us from Seattle and King County, where she worked with public health and served on their COVID response team. And she was integral during the pandemic to communicate essential health information, especially to historically underserved communities. So we're excited she's here and getting her started today. And then you saw all the public comment opportunities. We welcome everybody's input to the Port, and that is it. Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, and welcome, Karen. Have you here. All right, we'll move into public comment. So individual public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Members of the public may comment on agenda items and other port business. Comments should be directed to the commission as a whole and should not include comments about ports, individual port staff or members of the public. All speakers shall be courteous in language and demeanor, and shall confine remarks to those facts that are germane and relevant to the question or issue under discussion. So I might just mention too, we are having a public hearing during this meeting specific to the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. So if your comments are specific to that, you may want to hold them to for the public hearing portion. But I do have looks like general comment from Sharon Kuntz. Sharon, if you'd like to make your comment.
Yeah, sort of. We're ready.
Long COVID and I'm just barely moving. In fact, I better keep this on so I don't poison. Well, no, I'm not infectious. That's right. It's long COVID. Sorry. Hi, commissioners. Pardon the panting. Sharon Kuntz, Olympia, Washington, here on the county. I'm here against doctor's recommendations because this is so important. One of your missions is to defend the environment, and you're all relatively new in the long-term scheme of things to port work compared to a lot of concerned citizens who've watched it for years. I'm relatively new myself, and I started in 2007. So I'm telling you, people go way, way back before that. Others have been active for well over 20 years, and they have documentations and information that you don't. And I imagine some of even the current staff is not aware of. We elected you, we didn't elect staff, and I hope you'll bear that in mind when things get rushed to you and you get told you've got a deadline. You get to say, no, we haven't had enough time to study this. You get to make the decisions, you get to slow the process down, you get to set the pace, you get to set the agenda anytime, and I hope you will. Especially changes on the Port Peninsula, the airport master plan, dredging, just to name a few of the issues that are coming up soon. There's a document you're asked to approve today that's over 500 pages. I don't work full time, and I know several of you do, and I couldn't get through it in time to deal with it and absorb it. And here's my serious and I think crucial and desperate ask. And we've done it before at the port, and it was really important. The commissioners invited several of us, people who have been around for a long time and have the old documents and have information, to a work session where we got to talk and explain and ask questions and come back and forth, not do a 3-minute presentation the way we're supposed to somehow here and get done with it all with no follow-up. We provide information, we have documents, we can show you where there are future problems and past problems. And you can then, we can provide you with knowledge that, as I say, I don't even think probably part of the, much of the current staff even has. A previous commissioner did that because, and a previous commission had us in because we had documents that sort of appalled them when they found out what was going on. And because of it, the current, the ex-executive director, but current at the time, said, you're right, we will not do anything, make any changes on the Port Peninsula until it's had a complete environmental assessment, because I was not aware, he said, of this problem, and it's a biggie. So there are things like that, and I'm not a scientist, but there are scientists out there who've been watching the port for years who can help you with this. I don't see where the timer is. Is there something about to go off?
15 seconds.
Thank you. I was afraid of that. Okay, so let me just skip ahead. No, I'll stop there. I would hope that you would listen to us and let us have a meeting with you where we can have a full conversation. That's how they end it. Interesting. Okay, I'll dance off now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kuntz. Is there any hands up on the Zoom meeting that would like to make comment?
Yes, hand raised by Greg Griffith.
Okay, Mr. Griffith, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Well, my name is Greg Griffith, and I have appeared before the commission on one of your meetings last month. And basically, my message to you is at that time was to inform you about the work that I've been doing to nominate the KGY studio building to the National Register of Historic Places. And I just wanted to come back to you to continue that dialogue, to let you know that the Washington State Advisory Council on Historic Preservation will be hearing that nomination and other nominations to the National Register at their summer quarterly meeting on August 9th from 1 o'clock to 3:30 p.m. And the meeting will be on Zoom, and there's opportunity for the public to make comments about that. So just wanted to inform you that, and I have provided that information to your staff, Camille, as well as the Citizens Advisory Committee about that as well. So there is an opportunity for us to make any kind of comments about that time, about the nomination and the building's historic and architectural significance. But beyond that, I just wanted to take a few moments to come back to and say that this is an important property that merits your consideration for retaining and rehabilitating for the future. I know that the subcommittee is working on the waterfront the destination waterfront plan, and I would hope that the Port of Olympia commissioners and staff take into consideration retaining and rehabilitating the radio station studio building for future use and rehabilitation at that or another location on Port property. So I invite you to join with me in sort of recognizing the significance of the building and its contributions to local history and heritage, but also participate in envisioning the future of the building on Port property for the future and the enjoyment and education of future generations of Olympia residents. So thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Griffith. Are there any other hands up? Looks like Carla Wolfsburg has her hand up. Wolfsburg, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. My name is Carla Wolfsburg and I live in Tumwater. And I just want to make a public comment. It has to do with the procedure to work on what is called the remediation of Budd Inlet. I would like to propose that the word restoration of Budd Inlet be the primary goal of this project. I see that an environmental assessment has not been done on the entire peninsula since 1994. And it's very important to have this done in advance of, excuse me, telephone going off there, so sorry. Anyway, it's important to have an environmental assessment done before this master plan is even initiated. I think it's very backwards, the approach. And so I'd like to ask that it be reversed, that there's an environmental assessment done prior to the master plan, because I can't understand how you could create a master plan without really knowing what's going on the peninsula. And this science that seems to be missing in this whole process of remediation. I'm not really quite understanding why science hasn't been brought to the table to tell us how to really restore our beautiful waterway and West Bay, East Bay. Why aren't we listening to scientists? I don't see that anywhere in any of this approach. So I would ask that you reverse this somewhat and try to bring a science approach to it and a restoration approach to it. It's been done elsewhere very successfully. And the remediation is simply to clean up for the purpose of promoting dredging. I think that that's a very backwards approach to what the future should be for Budd Inlet. I think we should be thinking about people in the future and how they would consider looking at us back here at this time and what we are doing. Are we going to restore it for them? Or are we just simply going to continue to clean it up just for the purpose of having a navigation channel open? So this is my comment today, and I hope you would really consider restoration as opposed to remediation, and science as the leaders in this entire process. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfsburg. Is there any other public comment this morning?
raised hands.
All right, thank you. Let's go ahead and move on then. The next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar, bills and vouchers for June 2024, batch numbers 23 through 26. And there are no warrants over $200,000. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
To approve the consent calendar.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Calling for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to the next item, pending issues or business. We have budget season prep. Anatomy of a port budget. Pat Koff, Director of Finance. You have the floor, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Tad Koff, Director of Finance, Port of Olympia. Today's presentation is the budget anatomy. We're going to go over just kind of the high level of what to expect as the budget process goes through. Budget process begins in June, concludes in November. Requests for business units information on their dollars and input are sent out and then retrieved back into the accounting department. Sections are presented and reviewed by commissioners in some meetings that we're going to look at in further slides. Multiple work sessions are held to develop the final draft budget. And then we conclude then in November with the final draft budget presented with draft resolutions for adoption. Any questions on the general process?
I guess I have a question. When outside organizations are interested in being incorporated in our budget, when would you like them to approach staff in general based on this process?
Could you be a little more specific in what type?
So like Lacey Makerspace, EDC, Thurston Chamber, those organizations that we support annually, if there were a change or something new that was going to be added, when would be the best time for them to make that presentation to staff or commission? Or
Early on, now would be a great time, but I would hope those communications are kind of ongoing throughout the year and have good communication. But the earlier in the process, the better, so that those get worked in and we're all aware of that as much as possible. Any other questions? So I wanted to point out here in the first slide that the commission input opportunities, this is the rough outline of the various meetings that the commission will have going through the process. These are dates that are from last year's presentation, so they are going to be skewed earlier this year. Last year was a little later in the process, but just as a timing in between the dates, so this is up here for an example. And you'll see that you get several opportunities for input throughout the process. However, this year as well, in July, we've got some earlier meetings about focus and helping to guide where in different aspects want to be highlighted. Let's say training, capital improvements, whatnot, so the commissioners have even additional input in this season go through. Behind those scenes are the budget action timeline. I'm not going to go through all of this. This is just to give you an idea of the volume of how many staff meetings there are and back and forth bits of information that go into making the budget work. This also incorporates the prior schedule, but you're going to see a lot of different items in here of deliverables that between departments and stakeholders go into making the budget what it is when we arrive in November. And there's actually, it just goes on. So there are quite a few. So what does a mid-year budget kind of presentation look like? What are you going to see as we go through this? We're going to start out with the general agenda. This is kind of the run through. I don't have every slide in here because that would be a little too much. But in general, you're going to start out with Commissioner IOUs, which is the feedback as we go through meetings of questions that come up with answers from various staff. We're going to review the schedule every time we go through each meeting. We've got budget assumptions, which I'll show you. Excuse me. Capital investment plan, which I'll show you as well. The 2024 budget overview, 24 operational budget by business, which is a little bit more detailed look. The tax levy and non-operations slide, which we are going to be looking to bring Thurston County, the treasurer back in. They do a really good presentation on understanding tax levy usage, sources, options. So we're going to look to bring Jeff back from the Thurston County treasurer back in again to do that. And then as the process goes on, we always have questions and comments. So just running through what we're looking at there. This is a kind of an example. This is from last year of a generic kind of a session IOU type of questions, things like small cities program we've worked on, sea level rise, how's it being addressed, tax levy refund line item. These are just the types of questions that we've had in the past. And this is a sampling from last year.
I thought your IOU system worked really well last year.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea is to make this a little bit more interactive, a little bit less just stiff presentation. So as those meetings progress, there's as best as can be a flow of back and forth thoughts. So we get to the best budget for everyone. Commissioner Isle, you look like you have a question.
No,
Okay.
following right along, Ted.
Okay. So we also have a slide where we cover budget assumptions. These are just items that are high level that we're going to work into the budget, such as percentage increases of revenues, expenses, grants. We cover rates and fee adjustments and changes, and then any staffing changes as well. So these are sort of just a summary highlight of these areas that we can keep in mind and we can follow. And then this is the capital budget piece, not owned by finance per se. This gets worked on separately and is actually already in the works. And it gets married into the process at say about a quarter to a third of the way it enters into the budget presentation. Then it will stay there as we go. You'll get various times to look at this. And then as the whole budget comes into view, if there are any adjustments that need to be made to the capital budgets beyond what is initially done, you'll have more opportunities to take a look at that in whole as well. And one thing to point out, or a couple things I'll point out on the capital budget, is that this does really a good job of segregating out what the port funds or the port is responsible for on these projects and highlighting what is grant funded as well. Yes.
I just want to highlight that I've raised before that I'd like to see us having controls so that we can see the airport funds sort of revenues and expenses segregated. How's that work going?
We're still working on, and we're going to have those discussions as well to see if there's a better way to highlight that and display that. So we are always tracking costs and revenues discreetly, so we will be able to have a current picture of that for sure.
Would your desired outcome be to have like airport funds, general funds on this slide, for instance?
Thanks, Commissioner Harding. Not necessarily on this slide, but I would like to see that ability to do it. And I think, yes, since he pointed out how he's segregating port and grant funds, I think I'd like to see airport funds segregated. That's what we're trying to head. Because we have so little control as a local Thurston County wide port commission for with those lands that are here to support the airport, it's important for us to sort of section them off for everyone's understanding.
Very good. And we may be able to have a little bit more view of that as this in some other slides coming up. So capital budget, again, this is kind of not getting into all the details. It's a high level overview, but this is the size of the full capital budget. It's split into 2 slides so that it's at least more visible. Not going into this in detail. This is last year as an example. And then to keep in mind that and I'll flip between these two slides, each one of these has a page number on it, but they also have a white paper associated with it. So there's a more in-depth view that's developed, very, very well done about the specifics of each capital improvement item. And that is James Sommer, and he does a fantastic job on that. James is going to be coming up later.
I'm sorry, does it say what division it will be attributed to for future depreciation? That topic that keeps coming up with us.
They are right now attributed to the department that they are issued under. So it will be depreciated wholly underneath those departments. And one of the things that I'll read into your question, is something we're looking at to see if there's any way to fine tune the allocation of depreciation in case those assets are used in various areas. And one of the things that I'm thinking of specifically is looking at materiality. If something is loaned out for a brief amount of time, a separate segregation of that wouldn't have any material impact. But if there's something large or major, we want to make sure that those then are addressed and allocated properly. So we move on then to the statutory budget. This is just a section of the budget process that we go through. This particular slide is actually a requirement by the state, and on the publication of the budget, this is kind of the very first thing you're going to see. For the purposes of this slide, ops, maintenance, and admin expenses are condensed on one line item. They are broken out when it's really published, but this is fundamentally the very top, very highest level view of where you begin with cash and investments and then where you end with cash and investments. So this is an extremely condensed version basically of your budget for the year. Now, this might help address, and this is where we get opportunity to take a look at things a little bit more in depth. This is something we kind of changed from years past in last year, and we're going to work along these lines this year as well, where you're going to see high level but comparative budgets of the airport, Swantown Marina, the terminal, and properties side by side, so we can just get a holistic view of how operations are going. And then we move into more specifically each operating unit. And I think that this might be more where we can have that discussion of making sure you can see those costs segregated, especially on the airport side. We can have the discussion and maybe work at a different way of having that detail shown as well. But these are going to be more specific to each operational unit, and then the percentage of increases or decreases over the prior year. Other areas that we cover in the budget process are the general administrative costs. This is the a non-specific but roughly representative breakdown of what makes up the general administrative costs. I can't really read that from here, but there are things, salaries, outside professional fees, facility rental fees, general admin, supplies, utilities, just basically all the things that go into working on general administrative functions. And then we also have what I know is a point of interest is the spread or the allocation of the general administrative costs. Now, there is a fairly complex spreadsheet that goes into making this allocation. I can't put it on this. It would be not something you'd want to see on a slideshow presentation. It's long, it's several tabs. But we can discuss it further as far as the methodology, what goes behind it. There are different ways that any government agency can spread the general administrative costs, where they live, or something else that I think we're going to end up having some more discussions on where it shows. They are generally what they are, but where they show and how they get allocated is something that can be discussed. And then we move on to the tax levy slide. Now, for the purposes of this, I thought it was beneficial to actually have some numbers in here. These are last year's numbers, 23 going into 24. So this is the numbers for 24, roughly adding up to a tax levy of 7.8 to close to 7.9 million. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail about how this is all calculated. We're going to have a really good presentation on this because it's just a fantastic job of it. But more or less what this boils down to is in the common citizenry of Thurston County is going to be, well, what does this do to my taxes? You've got the assessed valuation of properties at roughly $60 billion. And then you've got the millage rate that calculates, which when you see it on your tax bill is the dollars or pennies per $1,000 assessed value. That's kind of what makes this slide up. And that's where this comes into the budget process. Yes.
I've been hearing other local governments talk about the 1% cap and how it's affecting them as with respect to inflation. It's sort of in real value terms, it's like governments are having less and less money. So I hope you can build in context about that so we understand sort of in with inflation considerations what it means.
Certainly. Yeah, we will be discussing this in depth at that time for sure. As a matter of fact, if I can get my hands on it, the presentation exists in last year's presentation. When this was done, I believe in October, I don't have the exact date, maybe the 16th. I'm not sure of the date that this Thurston County Treasurer came in and did this presentation. I looked that up and unfortunately the sound recording on that is difficult to hear. Otherwise, I would have already slipped it, cut it out and put it in here so you could hear it for review. Not, given it won't give you a chance to ask questions, but it's a very good presentation and a nice starting point. I'm going to see if I can get my hands on that earlier on as well with a good recording of it so you can have that for reference early on as well before it comes up in the budget process. Unless there's any other questions, going on to tax levy usage. I didn't propagate this slide, but this slide will start out with that $7.85 million at the beginning. And this is really where we allocate out and see the different places where that tax gets used. Predominantly, the largest usages to date are servicing debt, the various environmental expenses, and then the balance of it goes to community events, harbor patrol, small cities, special projects, and commission expenses. So it divvies out at that point in smaller amounts down towards the bottom. Last year, we went a little bit over the tax levy usage, I think $260,000 that then ended up coming out of operations or reserves. But that is this slide in particular is one that's got a lot of give and take in the different meetings where things can get adjusted or put in or taken out.
In our budget retreat, could we talk more about what's included in public amenities? I'm curious whether you and I talked about this in our one-on-one, but for the benefit of the rest of my commissioners, things that we are providing a public function on that are going under expenses under our business lines, like the marina might be bearing the cost of maintaining some of the trail, which is really a public amenity. So just further discussing that to ensure that we are communicating with the public on these amenities that are being provided, and we're also accurately reflecting our expenses in our business lines. Because I think there could be some further refining there that helps tell the story more accurately. Not that the accounting's not accurate, to be clear. The accounting is accurate, but I think
yeah, absolutely.
we're doing a lot of things that if we were a private sector business, we would not be doing. And so just making sure that everyone's aware of that.
Definitely, yeah. The economic impact of the port and the benefits that it gives would be great to highlight and call out, and so we understand it. Absolutely. We will have time to address that and dig in as well.
And yeah, and it lumps into a couple different buckets, but you can flag that.
I did. I will.
Thank you, Chad.
You're welcome. So that is mostly it. I didn't go through every slide that you'll see on those budget presentations, but at the end, you'll end up, as we get into November, we will arrive at a agreed to set of numbers. We'll know what the figures are. We will publish them there's 2 weeks requirement of publishing them before then we have a meeting of adoption. Then you will see a budget adoption motion in that final meeting. And as normal, that would be presented and then the budget would be adopted. And that's it. Any questions or comments?
Thank you, Chad. Any other questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item is our action calendar. And first up under the action calendar is the Bud Inlet Remediation and Integrated Port Peninsula Master Plan, which is the DOF contract amendment number 3. We have Sean Gilbertson, Director of Planning and Programs. Looks like you have the floor, sir.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. Good morning. I am Sean Gilbertson, Director of Environmental Planning and Programs here at the Port. I'm happy to present to you with Camille St. Onge a request, which is a follow-up to our July 8th briefing on the DOF contract for the Bud Inlet remediation and Integrated Port Peninsula Master Planning effort. Again, today's item is an action item. Switch slides here. It is an action item. We're requesting approval for a third amendment to the Dalton Olmsted Fugavand contract. This would be amendment number 3. We're going to give a brief overview of the project and the contract. We're going to talk a little bit about the phasing of both the project and the contract. Going to review the history of the contract and then the purpose of the proposed amendment. And then Camille will cover the integrated master planning efforts. So again, this contract amendment is to amend the DOF contract. There are a group of engineers and scientists that are leading the effort for the remediation project. The funding requested in this amendment allows us to continue an aggressive investigation schedule. So we're really getting out there and getting it done, getting the samples taken, learning what is out there and what needs to be done. This also amendment will allow for integration of the Bud Inlet project with upland long-term planning. It will strengthen our position to get state and federal funding by having a plan and having more information to share with those funders. And this also aligns with community requests for a broader long-term planning approach that involves the public extensively. So currently we're under what's called an agreed order with the Department of Ecology. We're on the second amendment of that. And what has happened over the years is that the agreed order has changed as we've learned more information, and basically it's expanded. We expanded the study area and what we're required to test, sample, analyze for. It has been a phased investigation, and we've matched the DOF contract up over the years to mesh with the ecology agreed orders as we go through and accomplish those. This amendment will allow us to really focus the investigation in on the West Bay. We did an extensive sampling in East Bay earlier this year, for which we should have results here coming out in about a month and a half or so. But we're going to be able to move into West Bay to accomplish the sampling, the sediment sampling over there. And then, of course, there's an integrated planning component, which was originally conceived with this contract and project. Now we're getting into the details a bit more of that. So the purpose of this contract amendment specifically is, 1, to extend that contract through December of 2026. It's to continue the Bud Inlet investigation. As I said, we're really looking to get into West Bay. Towards the end of this year, we should be on the water. We have a lot of permitting and planning to do before that happens, but the team is working on that now. And then this also adds funding for an integrated Port Peninsula Master Plan, which will help tie all of these elements together. And Camille will go into a bunch more detail on that. So yes.
Point me to where the scope of work is in the attachment by DOF.
In the packet. Yeah, there's a link to it. And it also was in the packet for the July 8th meeting as well. So with that, are there any other questions from the commissioners? All right, thank you. with that, I'll turn it over to Camille. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and good morning, commissioners. My name's Camille St. Ange. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Commission Affairs for the Port of Olympia. And I'm going to be recapping some of the details that I shared with you on July 8th. And as Sean mentioned, our cover memo links to the July 8th packet, which has the scope of work. And then on the dais today, you have a printout of all of the statement of qualifications for the contractors involved with the project. I want to share with you today an overview of the structure of the project. That was in the last meeting's packet, but we didn't display it on screen, and I wanted to make sure we had the opportunity to put it in front of you here today. So the commission and the executive director are really, the structure of this is you'll be working on interlocal agreements related to the master planning effort. And this master planning effort, as Sean mentioned, was conceived at the beginning of the Bud Inlet remediation project that was contracted in 2022. In the earlier July meeting, we discussed that the project was delayed roughly about a year, and that now we're at a point where we can get this back on schedule. And our commission on April 30th came together and highlighted the master planning effort as a priority for the port and our work here today. The port management team will be working closely with a suite of consultants led by Doff, Olmsted, and Fuggelwand. And say that 3 times fast. There is a host of 11 contractors or consultants that are working on that. What I have in front of you is a very draft schedule of events. It's based on contract approval here today. I want to point out that you don't see the commission updates on here, but another schedule will be developed that's in partnership with you so that we can incorporate you into updates throughout this project. This is a rough draft, though, beginning today. And if this contract amendment is approved, we would begin with the initial research and review for this master planning effort. And that would lead into developing options. We've proposed a steering committee be developed, and that we also would have some project tours that our commissioners would be invited to attend so that you can see other properties at ports that have embraced a master planning effort. That pattern you see between July and October with steering committee meetings, internal workshops, and open houses, then repeats throughout the project. I do want to call to your attention the demarcation in the middle, highlighting 2024 to 2025. That is to prompt me to let you know that the work leading up to 2025 will help inform the legislative asks and positioning that the port may have for a funding strategy at the state level, and then also for federal funding strategies. This is a recap of the deliverables that we mentioned a couple meetings, last meeting. So the Integrated Port Peninsula Master Plan is intended to begin with folding in the environmental assessment, remediation, cleanup, and restoration of Bud Inlet. And that includes the upland placement of sediments. It incorporates the adaptation to sea level rise and the Deschutes Estuary Restoration Project. In this master planning effort, a market and economic impact analyses will be conducted for both the marine terminal and for the marina and boat works, along with layouts and an integration analysis to the environmental situation happening throughout the peninsula. In addition to that, an open space and parks vision planning will take place where the community and our commission has the opportunity to determine how much of our space on the Port Peninsula you'd like to commit to parks and open space. The master planning effort will also include probable construction costs for any options that are developed. Our consultants are also being tasked with evaluating grant funding sources that align with the work and the proposals that they're developing. This will be packaged and branded for a final master planning effort that includes input from our commission, the community, and local governments. And Sean and I would be happy to entertain any questions that you have, and we have a suggested motion for you for this contract.
Thank you, Sean and Camille. Is there any questions or comments for Sean or Camille?
I have some questions, and I actually regret that we're not hearing from the consultant team at this juncture. So I'm finding it a little difficult because I'd like to get a better sense of what they offer and how they're going to go about doing their work. I think we're hearing concerns from the public about that sound like it's jargon. The comments about replacing the word remediation with restoration. And I don't think that they're jargon based. I think the concerns we're hearing are about what framework we're going to be using for our community engagement to determine what our goals are with the restoration work, and that it's all linked towards outcomes that affect us, that are societal outcomes and ecological outcomes. So as I researched, there's frameworks out there for sediment restorations that go remediation to restoration to revitalization is the kind of thing I think I'm trying to translate what I'm hearing from public comment. I don't see any that concept in current scope. Are you aware of this framework, and is this something you've discussed with the consultant team? Sean?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. Absolutely. Those analyses are going to be done as part of this process. And that is the analysis of what type of restoration work will be done in conjunction with the sediment cleanup work. So it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg thing. Right now, we have specific orders to go out and assess the sediment and see what is out there. And then from there, we will go into the process of creating a cleanup action plan. In the cleanup action plan, we'll have the opportunity to highlight certain things that may be habitat improvements or things that would be related to our cleanup action that are complementary. We just at this time don't have enough information really to know exactly what the cleanup action is going to look like. But certainly through the master planning process, and we're working with the POCAC and with the subcommittee very likely on Butt Inlet. So we're going to be pulling a lot of feedback from the community and including the scientists that are in the community. But the restoration part of the project will kind of coalesce as we go through the process to work with the cleanup action that's going to be required. Alex, do you have anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think you said it really well, Sean. I think at a minimum, the ecology cleanup requires that we are ensure that human health is protected from any potential risks associated with the contamination that's out there. So whether that's we need to remove it or we need to put a thick layer of cap material somewhere, it's to make sure there's no chance that humans can be exposed to it. But it also has a huge component, which is making sure the aquatic environment and the benthic environment that lives in the sediment is also protected from whatever risks are posed by the contamination. So in a large part, the cleanup goes a long way towards restoring it to its to at least a healthy functioning again. But then there's also, as Sean was saying, opportunities for doing additional restoration that we want to definitely incorporate. But we can't really define what those are until we have a sense of what the contamination is.
I think what I'm saying, I hear what you're saying, and that's great, but there's some concern then if the current scope and language from the consultants isn't using sort of the terminology that people are recognizing as part of this practice for public and community engagement. And that's what I'm translating from some of the comments we've been receiving. If I may have a follow-up on a different topic, Mr. Chair President.
Different topic?
Well, no, on a different issue.
Okay.
This is really exciting at the same time. So I want to address those public concerns. I think it's amazing what we're going to be able to do with revitalizing this land. And I'm wondering if anyone currently here, maybe Clarita, can speak to the East Bay redevelopment, because that was done, I see it's part of the consultant's scope of work that some of, in their qualifications, that Heartland was engaged with the East Bay redevelopment, which gave us the Hands-on Children's Museum and lot, and things that we take for granted as integral parts of our community. Is there anyone here on staff who can talk a little bit about the East Bay redevelopment?
I was going to address in our next presentation regarding the architectural contract. I am going to go through a little bit of the history that we have had as the Port Peninsula has paid attention to waterfront redevelopment. And so I'm going to bring up a little bit of East Bay. I'll tell you, you don't mind waiting, and if I don't answer the question, then we can engage again.
I don't mind. I really wanted to just highlight that that's very heartening that this team was engaged that deeply with our community and creating part of what makes us experience Olympia as Olympia. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I do just want to highlight what Jasmine was saying, and those were my questions as well, based on public comments I've heard and my own perspective, that we do need to restore back what was there, not just clean up, what was done. We can hopefully get back to the functioning Bud Inlet that was there, 50 years ago. And I think to do that, we need to look at the whole environmental picture to begin with. And I hope that that's part of the work. And it does seem to me that is going to be the work that's done to begin with the sampling. And then there will be many public comment opportunities and commission feedback so that we can do that. Exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we're listening to the comments that we're receiving and taking that to heart. It'll be definitely brought into our processes as we go through with input from the commission too. So we look forward to, we really are excited about the project and the future for Bud Inlet. We really are. It's going to be good. It's going to really make a big difference out there, and it's due time for us to get it done.
May I?
Yes.
And I don't know if there's technical definitions of remediation, restoration, and revitalization that I'm not familiar with, but is it a fair synthesis that this is a very science-driven remediation process that is keeping us in line with our agreed order with the Department of Ecology? And then we're moving on to an integrated Port Peninsula restoration and revitalization master plan that builds on the scientific process into a more, planning for revitalization builds on science, but then it takes in community feedback to figure out what revitalization actually means, right?
Correct, Commissioner. Yes. We have a great team of scientists. There are engineers, there's geologists, there's biologists, there's chemists, just a really strong team of scientists. And we have really the baseline. We have to analyze the contaminated sediment. That's an explicit requirement. But the hope is really to make sure that while we're assessing the options for dealing with the contamination, that we're looking at the restoration and the revitalization and remediation. And those are in a lot of ways interchangeable terms, but certainly we want to integrate any of the habitat restoration type things into the long-term cleanup action plan and beyond. So we're listening, we're trying to take a very scientific approach as we go through this, but there are certain steps that we need to go through initially.
Sean, on that note, can you clarify, we are already have a contract with this team to do the scientific assessment, characterization work, remediation work. This is a $5 million increase in the contract for them to be our consultants in the planning work of how this integrates with the community. Is that correct?
Well, $4 million of the work is actually for the Bud Inlet investigation. So it'll be sampling, analysis, permitting, planning. The other 1.24 is, yes. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was just my comment. Private sector, these types of planning numbers hurts my brain a little bit, but I understand that this is the public process. This is how we provide transparency. This is how we allow for public feedback. Heartland seems very qualified. I would just throw in from my day job, really having some local knowledge as far as construction costs with tenant improvements, rental rates. Because this is a small market and just ensuring that they are working with local professionals because we don't show up on the spreadsheet. That some of these larger projects would be easier to have. We don't have good data. You actually have to talk to a human being here. And then I recently met with the chair of the City of Olympia's Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. And this goes to Commissioner Basavado's previous comments about ensuring that we're incorporating the City of Olympia at the beginning of the process, which I know you are. I think that that particular group could be really helpful with the open space and parks vision casting that Camille talked about. I said to him, I'm like, I don't know what the best practices are. Is it having a bunch of little postage stamps? Is it having something big? Like, what is the vision that the City of Olympia and the port and the public can share for the open spaces? Because I think that that's really going to help direct our investment, both private and public. And then we can be clear with what we want. We want a boat rental, but we also want a trail, or, you know, and we can marry those together. And yeah, it's exciting. It's a big project.
Commissioner Sanders, anything?
I just appreciate the fact that it's being done in phases, and to know and understand that this is a phased approach, and that environmental science, it has been the forefront, you know, from the beginning. And this integrated approach takes a look at scientific data and incorporates it into the development of the waterfront in conjunction at the same time. And it's critical to look at it as a source of funding opportunities as well, because all of the information that is going to be brought together by this will be able to assist the port in applying for federal and state funds. Often it comes hand in hand, that environment along with development it's a two-piece front moving together. Without the learning about the environment, you cannot have economic development without learning, you know, what's happening with your lands and aquatic nature and ecological. And so I appreciate the fact that it is in phases, and that we're using science-based data to look into it. And then from then it can phase on to say, oh, we'd like to see, you know, like eelgrass, you know, we'd like to, you know, have a buffer zone, you know, and all these things come in phases. And so I appreciate the fact that when I read the scope of work, it did include community engagement. The contractors did include working with our municipalities. And so thank you for all your work, Sean. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right.
Question for our attorney, Chris. Right. Personally, I'm ready to move forward with the $4 million for the continued scientific work, but I feel like I don't have a handle yet on the sort of master planning and how that's going to happen. So would it be possible to segment this into two motions?
You can move to amend the motion, and there would be need to be a second, and then discussion on the motion to amend. And if that passed, then the motion as amended could then be voted on.
So I may be alone on this. I'm going to, and I'll find out after I make this motion. I would move to amend this motion to make the amount $4 million for a not to exceed amount of minus 1.24 million to keep the Bud Day characterization
So
work going forward.
can we let's make sure we clarify this. Very good. I mean, I'm happy to take your motion. But maybe take just a minute, write it out exactly how you want it to read, so that we get it correct, because this is the suggested motion. That doesn't mean we have to use this motion. We can use whatever motion you have, but let's make certain it's absolutely clear and everybody understands.
I think my motion's.
So I will move to authorize the executive director to sign amendment number 3 regarding contract number 2022-1002, increasing the Dalton, Olmsted and Pugel Head budget by $5,240,000 for a not to exceed amount of $11,831,936 and with a new term date of December 31st, 2026.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second on this motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to authorize the executive director to sign amendment number 3 regarding contract number 2022-1002, increasing the Dalton Olmsted fuel van budget by $5,240,000 for a not to exceed amount of $11,831,936 and with a new term date of December 31st, 2026. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Made the motion. I think I am first to speak, correct?
Yes, please.
Although it does stretch my brain, the types of dollars we're talking about for planning, I think that this is going hand in hand with our commitment to restoring Butt Inlet and activating the waterfront peninsula and doing so in a manner that incorporates public feedback, other stakeholders, and I anticipate that there may be an amendment to this, and I think it would tie the hands of our staff to not move forward with the master planning, and it would not allow us to execute this process in a fashion with our intent would not be realized.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, I would completely agree, man. I think we've been provided adequate information. We've been given detailed information on how exactly this money will be spent, the consultants that we will be working with, what will be going on. So I'm comfortable moving forward.
Any further discussion?
I will not be bringing forward an amendment to your motion, Commissioner Harding, but I do want to share with the executive director that I need a little bit more understanding of how this consultant will engage some of the frameworks for our community conversations. And I'd like to have a follow-up conversation about that as we move.
Yep. I will just say I support Commissioner Basavada in that being involved at the front end of the scoping is how we will get the work product that we need to satisfy the public's concerns. So I think Commissioner Basavada and maybe some of my other commissioners as well might be able to have more informed feedback as to what the public is saying. I haven't gotten specific comments on that. So, but it sounds like other commissioners have. So helping set the scoping based on public's concerns and other jurisdiction concerns.
Absolutely. And if the commission would like, we can have this be a topic on a work session. And the consultant team in here to talk to you about it as soon as we can.
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, seeing none, yes, thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none, I will call for the vote on the motion to authorize the executive director to sign amendment number 3 regarding contract number 2022-1002, increasing the Dalton, Olmsted, and fuel van budget by $5,240,000 for a not to exceed amount of $11,831,936 and with a new term date of December 31st, 2026. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Sean and Camille and all the staff working on this.
I mean, it's really the biggest one we're likely to make. Point of
Next.
privilege. This is likely the largest amount in a single motion and resolution that we'll make for several years. I just want to.
Shall we celebrate something?
It is a $200 million project.
Thank you for the comment. Nicely pointed out. Okay, moving on to the next item in the action calendar is Port Management Agreement application to Washington Department of Natural Resources. Clarita Maddox, Retail Senior Manager, or Real Estate Senior Manager, sorry.
Okay,
Real Estate Senior Manager, Clarita, you have the floor.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Marita Maddox again, Real Estate Senior Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning and present this as an action item. This is an application to the Washington Department of Natural Resources. And today we require an action. We'll briefly go over the port management agreement, which expires September 30th of this year, and the application to the Washington Department of Resources general process. I presented this to you on July 8th and went through the entire process, so I'm gonna try to keep this short. This was part of the packet, so hopefully everybody has either comments or questions I can answer further, but I'll go through this quickly for the sake of time. This was all brought to you before on July 8th for the purpose of relating how the port management agreement works with the Department of Natural Resources and commonly known as the PMA, Port Management Agreement. And they are intended to identify the respective responsibility managing aquatic lands that abut uplands that are owned by ports. The Port of Olympia last PMA was signed in 1984 and it expired in 2014. Then it was amended for an additional 10 years. That takes us to today's reason for being here, which expires September 30th. However, in 1996, DNR disputed the ownership of the western part of the vacated Columbia Street, the submerged highlands, the harbor, and the channel. And when the city of Olympia vacated that street in 1924. The disputed area is identified as the PMA Parcel 2, and it is the western area of the Anthony's Restaurant and Marketplace buildings over here in the Market District. Amendment number 2 was signed on September 30th, which memorialized the agreement between the port and DNR settlement agreement for that dispute. And one of the parts of that dispute was DNR respective ownership as well as the ports. And DNR also receiving 35% of the revenues we get from those two businesses. To date, for the purpose of being full disclosure, DNR has received $328,576,000 from 2016 to 2023. The port, in the process of applying, we need to have an updated survey, and that has been performed and completed with the acceptance and review by DNR. And we also follow the guidelines of the Washington Public Ports Association that created a special guidelines for all ports to go through an application like this one. And at the last meeting, people didn't know how to get to it, so I put a link to getting a copy of it. You will always get a PDF, so it's not a simple click and get it. So actually have to you get a PDF and download it to read it. Right now I have a suggested motion unless you have questions or comments at this time.
Any questions or comments? Anyone like to make a motion?
Move to adopt Port of Olympia Resolution 2024-06, approving submitting application to the Washington Department of Natural Resources for an official management agreement providing for the management of those state-owned aquatic lands which meet the criteria established for such agreement by the Port of Olympia and authorizing the executive director to sign the agreement on behalf.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the topic? Commissioner Harding, you made the motion again?
Yes, sir.
No comment, comments, questions? Any other comments or questions?
You, Clarita.
You need to vote.
Hearing none, there is a motion on the floor to adopt Port of Olympia Resolution 2024-06, approving submitting application to the Washington Department of Natural Resources for an official management agreement providing for the management of those state-owned aquatic lands which meet the criteria established for such agreement by the Port of Olympia and authorizing the executive director to sign the agreement on behalf of the Port of Olympia. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right, the third item on the action calendar, we are going to move into public hearing. The public hearing is for amending the Port of Olympia's comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements and this public hearing is now open. All persons wishing to be heard should have signed in at the sign-in table, or if attending virtually, by raising your hand. If you have not yet done so, please do so now. The process will be as follows. This public hearing is being held for the purpose of receiving public comments on the port's amended comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. Port proper public notice of tonight, or this morning's public hearing, as required by statute, by publishing notice of the public hearing at least 10 days in advance in the Olympian on July 11th, 2024, pursuant to RCW 53.20.020. The rules of order for the public hearing are as follows. The public hearing will proceed in an orderly fashion. Anyone who would like to provide public comment will be given an opportunity to be heard. When giving public comment, please state your name and where you reside. Please speak slowly and clearly as proceedings are recorded. In fairness to all who give public comment, each person will be given 3 minutes to address the commission. Ask that commissioners hold any discussion on the topic until the action item is considered per the meeting agenda. This public hearing is dedicated for the presentation of testimony. No public debate is allowed. Before hearing from members of the public, I call on Port Director of Operations, Warren Hendrickson, who will make the staff presentation. Warren, you have the floor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Commissioners. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations, here to address the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements via Resolution 2024-07. Today's presentation is an action item. Approval is requested. There actually will be 2 motions offered for your consideration when we get to that particular agenda item. Before you is a comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements amendment. I may refer to it as scheme or CSHI or the entire word. This is a brief background review. The full advisory presentation was provided to the Commission on July 8th, 2024. There will be far more details in the meeting packet from that particular date, as well as the video. I will not go into all of the details that were provided for that meeting. Additional background and source information will be available from the July 8th meeting. I will highlight a brief background review, also include the review of changes since the last amendment of the scheme, and then provide the amendment to you, which will be approved by the Commission via resolution. Secondly, there will be an opportunity to memorialize our updating process going forward with an annual update as a best management practice. There are several Port Keystone documents. The strategic plan includes the mission statement and vision statement, initiatives and goals of the port. The comprehensive scheme is required by RCW 53.20, and then the annual budget. Each of these documents are approved by the Commission, and as you can see by the photo, they form the foundation for everything that we do as a port. In short, a strategic plan outlines our purpose, who we are, what's important to us. The scheme highlights what we have and what we intend to do with it, and the annual budget informs the public and Thurston County as to how we're going to pay for it. Definition of the scheme: it is required by RCW. It portrays the port's geographical boundaries and identifies the specific property facility improvements anticipated, most importantly, requiring the expenditure of public funds. The contents are multiple. We start off with a map, the general statement of objectives of the scheme, a specific description and inventory of existing plant facilities, a description of exactly what those improvements will be over time, and then capital improvement plan and schedule with an attending budget. Going forward, as I highlight some of the revisions that are taking place to the plan since last amended, I'm going to use the term commission scheme action. When you see those words, they mean the following: that the property was declared surplus to the port's needs, that the sale of the property was in the public interest, that the scheme was thereby amended, and the list of improvements are therefore removed from the comprehensive scheme. So when you see those dates and that term, it means each of those 4 items. So the revisions then to the current scheme. The first was the sale of surplus property, 608 Washington Street Northeast in Olympia, known within the scheme as being within the Market District borders. The buyer of that property was the Lot Clean Water Alliance. The sale price was $1.13 million. The commission action took place on May 8th, 2023 via resolution 2023-03, and the sale closed on July 13th, 2023. The second revision was also a sale of surplus property. The Commerce Business Center, known in the scheme as the Lacey Properties. The buyer, 2625 Willamette LLC. In the purchase and sale agreement, it was also known as 1892 Holdings LLC. The sale price of the Lacey Properties was $9.6 million. The commission action date was December 11th, 2023 via resolution 2023-12, and the sale of that property closed on March 18th, 2024. The third set of additions is the addition of a new section to the scheme with a port focus on environmental initiatives. I want to give particular credit to the Director of Environmental Planning and Program, Sean Gilbertson, who personally wrote this section, and his contributions are notable. It includes a description of the Bud Inlet remediation process, sea level rise, the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan, which is the result of a joint interlocal agreement with the City of Tumwater, and the port's energy sustainability initiatives. It's also important to note that among the recent revisions that we're including in the scheme before you today, we are retaining the 2017 development guidelines. They are retained and remain in full effect per resolution 2017-04. Let me set the stage on how the resolution is going to work. Right now, we're in the midst of a public hearing. We're in the presentation of that portion of the public hearing. Following the presentation, there will be an opportunity for the commission to ask questions and make comments with regard to this presentation and the overall process. Following commissioner questions and comments, we will then enter a public comment period, and I will step away from the podium. After the public comment is complete, then the public hearing remarks will conclude and the public hearing will be closed. At that point in time, the commission will then proceed to the next action item, which will be the consideration of the resolution. So when it comes to you, the resolution, the public hearing will have already taken place, the public comment will have been received, and the public hearing will be closed. We don't do this very often, so it's something I want to just point out. Sir.
Allow me to please clarify for me, is because in the opening of the public hearing, I asked commissioners to hold any discussion on the topic until the action item is considered. So now you're saying we will have discussion after the presentation.
There are questions and comments about the presentation first, but the motion is not going to be under consideration during the public hearing.
Correct.
That is the next agenda item. And at that point in time, if there's any discussion about the viability or the value and purpose of the resolution, it would take place at that time. Does that help?
It does. I just wanted to be clear because our comments contradicted each other.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. The key about the comments is that there would be no commission dialogue during the public comment portion, is what that is intended to address. Much like at the beginning of the meeting where a public comment is just provided to the commission. But thank you for the question. So when the resolution does come to you, after the public hearing is closed in the next action item, these are the comments that you will see within it. First, it notes that it supersedes resolution 2017-404. It amends by resolution. It notes the amended scheme as a result of the resolutions for the two property sales, both at 608 Washington and the Lacey Properties via the two resolutions shown. It also attests to the public notice requirement with 10 days notice per RCW that has been met. The Olympian publication date was July 11, 2024. An affidavit of that publication is in your packet. The development guidelines of resolution 2017-04 are retained, and that the public hearing requirement that would have just recently closed has been met. And then ultimately the resolution amends the comprehensive scheme. Next steps going forward So again, at the completion of this, we will then go into public testimony. We will close the public hearing. There will be public hearing concluding remarks. At that point in time, the commission president will then call for the next agenda item, which will be the action item of this resolution. And I do want to point out at this point in time that there will be two separate and independent motions. The first is the consideration of resolution 2024-07, which revises the scheme contents as presented. And the second motion will be to approve and memorialize an annual update process as part of our budget hearing and public hearing in November of each year. Next steps then for the commission and the port. The commission during future scheme updates will have the opportunity to consider future component documents for formal incorporation as individual appendices. So the end result is the scheme is one document, but it's really a library of documents that dictate what the port has and what it will be doing with those facilities. That includes the capital investment plan and annual capital budget, an airport master plan update, an integrated port peninsula master plan that was the subject of a presentation earlier tonight or this morning, as well as an EIS as amended and/or SEPA checklist. So each of these can be made available in a suite of documents, and it's envisioned that this would all be available for the public on the port website as part and supporting of the comprehensive scheme. Lastly, the document in tonight's packet is a very simple Word document, but ultimately, once approved, the port staff will follow up and create a more formal looking comprehensive scheme document, very similar to our Vision 2050 and Strategic Plan 25 documents that will be available for public download off the website or distribution. So with that, with regard to this presentation, are there any questions or comments from the commission?
I don't hear any, so let's move right on into public comment. We have one person signed up, Sharon Kuhn. Sharon, would you like to give your public comment on the scheme of harbor improvements?
Is there no clock anymore?
It's on the screen.
Sharon Coons, Thurston County. There's so many things that I'm sort of baffled. I'm not sure exactly how to do this, how to start, but you're approving changes to things that I just had a chance to look at this, but construction and reconstruction at the airport of runways and things that the public made very clear a couple of years ago when we were discussing that they didn't want increased traffic at the airport. All of these things need more comment one at a time. And so this sort of frightens me when the schemes come up because they include so much material in one place. And I hope you'll keep an open mind so that later you can and understand that you can go back and change these things. It's not written in stone. You commissioners have the right to do things like that. I wanted to comment on the change that has happened recently with the action calendar, but you might not think that's appropriate right now. But there used to be a chance to, like prior to the last issue that you voted on, there used to be a chance for public comment at that point too, right before you made your vote. And they took that away a few years ago, but the commission voted that change and they can certainly vote it back again. People feel pretty funny that they can't comment on something that you're voting on. And it's alarming sometimes. So I'd like to have commented yet in the last issue on the dredging and such, and just tell you that what I've learned from scientists, and I'm not a scientist, nor do I play one, but I've got to say that a lot of people, three scientists, maybe that's not that many, but I'm surprised I know that many, had said that it was a real mistake to start stirring things up once we've got bad sedimentation. Sedimentation has covered some of the good stuff now, and you start stirring it up, it can destroy the benthic community. So I was concerned with the way they were discussing going in there and really that investigation. And I guess there were a couple of other things, but one thing that was brought up was the Hands on Children Museum. I don't know if you're aware that from the old Cascade Pole, there's a whole leak of dioxin near there. And finally, Harry Branch and other people, scientists said, you've got to put a sign up that people shouldn't be going on that beach. But every time we go and look at that sign, it's covered by a bush now. It's down near the, not Anthony's, but their other restaurant down there, Hearthfire. And so that is a serious issue the public needs to be aware of, because they're encouraging people to go on that beach where there's dioxin, which is poisonous. All right, so I crammed in a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily apply. Thank you for not stopping me. I appreciate it.
All right, is there anybody on Zoom who would like to give public comment on the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements discussion?
Ann Witt had her hand raised. On Zoom.
All right, Ms. Witt?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Jan Witt and I live in Olympia. I have a question about when cumulative impacts of port projects, when environmental assessment of cumulative impacts of port projects occurs. We have a comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements that appears to be going forward without any environmental review. In 1994, the last time that the Port of Olympia did an environmental impact statement for port projects, that EIS was for the strategic plan of the Port of Olympia. As near as I can tell, the only thing that has changed is the identification of what you're doing. The comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements used to be called a strategic plan for the Port of Olympia. That strategic plan required an environmental impact statement, and that environmental impact statement required an assessment of cumulative impacts of the different areas of the Port of Olympia. For instance, the airport cumulative impacts were considered, the impacts on the Port Peninsula. And I think that rather than piecemealing together projects without an environmental review of the cumulative impacts of all of those projects together is not beneficial to the people of this community. And I believe that rather than piecemealing, that this comprehensive scheme of harbor improvement should be considering environmental impacts. For instance, the projects that Ms. Coons mentioned about the airport, where is the assessment of the cumulative impacts of all of those projects that are being included in this comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements? I would really like to know if the commissioners have an answer to that question. And if you don't, I ask that you please delay a decision on this in lieu of considering where you're going to be looking at cumulative impacts of port projects, such as occurred in 1994. When is an EIS going to be done for that considers that? And what document is it going to be done with? If not the comprehensive scheme, when are you going to be considering that issue? Thank you for this opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. Executive Director Smith will consider the question and see what we can do to answer that. So thank you. Any other public comment on the Zoom?
No more raised hands on Zoom.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Carla Wolfsburg.
Carla Wolfsburg, you have.
Oops. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure if I unmuted properly. I'm just concerned about this Newmarket Industrial Campus Development Guidelines. Now, I think Mr. Hendrickson addressed this a bit, but the past real estate development master plan that was completed, is my understanding, in 2018, is not completely characterized in this harbor scheme. It's a a lengthy document, and I'm just wondering why it wasn't completely included to cover all the points that were in this significant plan that included a lot of public comment, a lot of public involvement, stakeholder involvement. The commission did not adopt this plan, which of course I think is a unfortunate situation because it's really quite an extensive plan and it really does address a lot of issues. But I don't understand why the whole thing wasn't included in this. I think it's sort of piecemealed into this harbor scheme. So perhaps that could be answered, and perhaps you could consider concluding the entire document as part of this plan, which is much more comprehensive than what I see included here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
See none on Zoom.
She named
I'm sorry, Missy, I couldn't hear you.
I don't see any more raised hands.
Okay. Well, thank you for the public comments offered. There being no further testimony, I will now close the public testimony portion of the hearing. With the closure of the public testimony portion, the commission will soon undertake the next action item of the agenda, namely to consider the action to be taken and to vote on the resolution to amend the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. The port's harbor improvements is on file at the offices of the Port Olympia, 606 Columbia Street Northwest, Suite 300 in Olympia, Washington. And any member of the public may obtain a copy at this address during normal business hours. A summary of the amended comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements is also available on the port's website, www.portolympia.com. Thank you, and now we will move forward to our next agenda item, which is Resolution 2024-07, Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations. You have
Thank
the
you,
floor.
Commissioner. I appreciate that. Let me move forward. We'll need a mouse adjustment on the screen.
I would move to adopt resolution 2024-07, amending the Port of Olympia Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 2024-07, amending the Port of Olympia Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements as presented. Is there any discussion? Richard Harding.
I just, for the benefit of the public, the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements was from the very beginning, ports were granted with certain powers, and this was intended to be a heightened level of communication with the public. So this is in addition to our strategic plan. This is in addition to a lot of other work that we do. This is just a very formal way of communicating with the public as to the nature and extent of our development plans. So I appreciate the work that you put into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren, and I just wanted to thank you and Sean especially for putting together the environmental portion of things. That was very good improvement to this scheme of harbor improvements.
I do know both of them and look forward to adding the EIS as amended and or SEPA checklists in the future, because I thought that we were going to include it in this one, but I look forward to amending it next year to include those.
And I just, it's a little awkward that we heard public comment, but don't have an opportunity to ask questions after public comment or have it inform how we're thinking. I don't know if there is such an opportunity, but for me, I have not been briefed on why the real estate New Market Industrial Campus Master Plan from 2017 is just sitting there on a shelf, not adopted or incorporated into this. There was a lot of community engagement around it. So I'd welcome you to address that now if that's not out of order, if you can address that.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'd be happy to, in addition to whatever questions may also have occurred in your own minds since I gave my presentation earlier this morning. The reason that particular plan is it's in draft form, it's actually available on the port website. The commission never adopted it. So therefore, it's not part of the scheme, but it is available. And that was several years ago. And I can't actually comment as to the reasons why the commission chose not to adopt it at that time, but it did not. And as a draft document, therefore, it has no formal standing. and therefore is not included in the scheme.
So could it be adopted and incorporated into the scheme in the future, or how would that work? Because today, obviously, it's not teed up to be incorporated by reference into the plan. None of my fellow commissioners, including myself, prepared for that, but it's a comment we heard. Could you clarify how and if that would be possible upon review to incorporate this by reference?
It could be. As I mentioned, the scheme essentially is one document in a library of documents. The new Market Industrial Campus Development Plan could in fact be one of those documents that could support it. The process would be to take a look at that draft plan, to go ahead and see what has changed, city codes, otherwise port initiatives and goals, and then update that document to a current version, and then bring that back before the commission for action as to whether or not it meets the port's intent, and then could then be included as, again, one of the suite of documents that would support the scheme. And it certainly could be done. There would be a process by which that could easily be done. But the reason it's not a part of the scheme today is because it was never accepted and approved by the Port Commission.
And this comment was made when Commissioner Aiello and I first took office, and at that point, we didn't have the context for why it wasn't adopted, and it was stale, and now it's further stale. So that was the concern, is that it's now, the world has changed pretty significantly since the work was done, with lots of things. So whether or not we wanted to continue putting effort into that would be, I think, something the commission would need to further discuss.
And if there are other questions too that may have come up, I'd be happy to answer that while the motion's under consideration.
Further comments or questions? And then I'll call for the vote on the motion to adopt resolution 2024-07, amending the Port of Olympia Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, commissioners. The second motion, and I do want to highlight that these motions are independent actions, is the memorialization of a best management practice, if the commission should desire, to go ahead and amend the comprehensive scheme on an annual basis as part of the annual budget public hearing and approval process. When we approve the tax levy and the budget each year, it does require a public hearing, as does an amendment of the scheme. So as a result, a public hearing is already scheduled and as part of the process. It would be fairly simple to simply add the scheme update as a part of that annual public hearing. So I offer this motion and any questions that you might have.
Move to adopt a plan to amend the Port Olympia Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements on an annual basis in concert with the annual budget public hearing and approval process each November.
Second.
Right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Tom, you want to start? No discussion? Any other discussion?
I just appreciate to be able to do it on an annual basis for best practices so we can keep up to speed.
Hearing no other discussion, I will call for the vote on the motion to adopt a plan to amend the Port of Olympia Comprehensive Scheme of Harbor Improvements on an annual basis in concert with the annual budget public hearing and approval process each November. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Warren. Okay, moving on. Action other calendar, we have none. Advisory calendar, Waterfront Center Architectural Contract Award, James Summer, Capital Assets Program Manager, and Clarita Maddox, Real Estate Senior Manager. You have the floor, James.
I just wanted to pipe in briefly. This is a very long presentation, as you may have noticed from reviewing the packet, and we wanted to see if we can save questions till the end, or if you can just make a note of them, because we are conscious of time and we want to make sure you all get over to Richland this afternoon. So, thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. I am James Summer, your Capital Assets Program Manager. I will be joined at the podium by two of my colleagues, Camille St. Ange, Director of Strategic Initiatives, Commission Affairs, and Clarita Maddox, the Real Estate Senior Manager. And we are here today to present a Waterfront Development Architectural Contract Award. So today's presentation is advisory only. We are just here to share information. We won't make you read any proposals or amendments or anything at the end. So A couple things we're going to talk about is the port vision and approach. We will get into the integrated Port Peninsula Master Plan. We have a couple project case studies for you. And then at the end, we will go into the contract details. So at this point, I'd like to invite Fareed up to the microphone.
Good morning again. Great to be here for this particular presentation. I've been here so long that every time we move forward with something to look forward to and have that vision in our minds is very exciting. So I've seen a lot, and this is one of them that I won't be a part of as I retired, but I look forward to hearing about it and reading about it. Today, my involvement in this is really pretty simple and short. I want to take you down memory lane a little bit regarding the development and the improvements of the waterfront on the peninsula. In concert with the mission of the port, creating economic opportunities and building community for all Thurston County through responsible resource uses. In 1995, the port focused on a port strategic comprehensive plan, which included extensive public involvement throughout the county, where the Citizens Advisory Group, now known as the Citizens Advisory Committee, were also involved. And all of these folks were very supportive of the waterfront improvements. From the vision of 1995 to change the face and the enhancements to the waterfront on the peninsula came great investment and change from the port. The first development was the mixed use that now we enjoy at the Market District. And that included the port investing on the infrastructure to create a new site to relocate the farmers market. And in 1996, the city of Olympia built that facility on the Market District. Along with that came other uses in the Market District, such as the office and retail development by the Rance Group, the Batdorf from Bronson Coffee Roasters, the high-end restaurant Anthony's Home Port, and the Port Plaza. The viewing tower actually was on the other side on East Bay, and we moved it to the Port Plaza, where we now enjoy beautiful views and incredible events happen at the viewing tower. And also we later or close to 1998 or so, we built the ILWU hall for the union to use. The revitalization of the East Bay lands became a major focus of the port as well, following the cleanup of that area. And the city of Olympia purchased some of that cleaned up land to construct the Hanson Children Museum. The East Bay District began to take shape by the port moving the Marine Drive and creating bike paths, lighting, landscaping, sidewalks, and extended the water and sewer lines on that area. And the most recent development that we have enjoyed is and be one of our tenants at the East Bay District is the Westman Mills residential building. The port kept preparing opportunities for opportunities to enhance the waterfront, and the Swantown Boatwork facility was built at the Swantown Marina District. And the North Point District started off with the development of the Olympia Area Rowing Association building and the famous Hearthfire Grill, which enjoys one of the most beautiful sights and views of our area where we live. So all of this development was taking place while the port was focusing on cleanup. The sites of the Cascade Pole was a great focus and a great investment, and we're still going through it. We watch what is built there, what can be built, and we're very careful as to what the planning is. And now we are focusing on the budding cleanup. So from the start, the port has always been interested and really concerned and caring about not only bringing economic development and new jobs, but also the environment. As an important part of the port's vision and strategic plan for the waterfront improvements, the port has worked closely with multiple partners and public entities, with groups of all kinds, tribes, and private developers to create districts that bring together the community of Thurston County, visitors from all over the country, and even international visitors. Now that brings us to today, where the vision for enhancing the waterfront continues, and it lines up with the Port's Strategic Plan 2025 and the Port of Olympia's 2050 Action Plan. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Camille, who's going to take us to the master planning.
Thank you, Clarita. I really appreciate hearing that history. I'm sure our commissioners do as well, and your passion for the community and economic development, along with environmental cleanup. This morning, commissioners, I'm going to be sharing with you some details about the master planning and how any development in the destination waterfront would be folded into the master plan. And then I'm going to share some brief case studies with you about similar properties. So the Integrated Port Peninsula Master Plan has a number of different projects folded into it that take environmental consideration, including the destination waterfront, which is just one component. So I want to thank you, commissioners, for approving the moving forward with the master planning effort earlier this morning. So just to get clarity on the property that we're specifically speaking about today, is the Catalyst project as part of the destination waterfront. And it's planned to be integrated into the master planning effort across the Port Peninsula. And what you're looking at on this map is what we call destination waterfront. There are several sites that have land use plan recommendations for it. And site D, which is outlined in that pink color, is right where our marina office, which is a double wide mobile home, is located today, that has been assessed and determined it is beyond its lifespan and needs to be removed, recommended by outside professionals to remove that property. And that's where this Catalyst project would go. Just want to be clear that any consultants working on any type of development in destination waterfront will be cross-pollinated with Bud Inlet revitalization, remediation, restoration, and the environmental and science teams. And I'll give you an example of that. Moffett and Nickel is part of the Bud Inlet cleanup project. They are also one of the consultants who's part of the master planning project. And they're also part of this Catalyst project here, bringing some cross-pollination and expertise throughout the stream. And Thomas Architecture Studios is the architect that would be on record for the overall Upland Master Plan, and also developed the destination waterfront visioning and master plan. So I want to speak to the cleanup and combining it with capital development. Clarita shared a history of this process that the port has taken over the last several years. And that is the recommendation that the team has today with this project. And that is to include environmental stewardship along with capital development. And this will maximize and expedite environmental cleanup and bring economic benefits to the community quicker than if they were daisy chained. And it also helps with in terms of integration with sea level rise resilience would be taken into account in this process. And then we believe it's responsible asset management to fold this into the overall master planning effort. So next I know this has been a long meeting this morning, and so I'm going to move through these case studies swiftly so I can get this over to James. But the Port of Everett's approach is similar. So what we're going to be talking about is 3 case studies that are ports that have incorporated environmental cleanup and capital development. This is a known strategy for cleanup sites, not only on waterfronts, but also in internal urban areas. For example, Seattle has multiple cleanup sites that have been remediated and turned into affordable housing, for example. So the Port of Everett approach, they asked themselves this question. They wanted to think big Is the cleanup a priority, and is the integration with the core vision mission of the organization? Will this revitalization and capital development meet that? And I think their answer was yes. They combined cleanup and capital development to expedite the economic returns to the community. And you can see their design charrette there that happened at the beginning of their project. The outcome of Everett was they have what they call Waterfront Place, and it was nearly 10 years of work, but it was an innovative cleanup site, and 65 acres of Waterfront Place was completed. They removed more than 150,000 tons of contaminated soil. They remediated the groundwater plumes. They dredged contaminated soil, and they removed creosote structures. And the result was a 1.5 million square foot public and private investment opportunity. The Port of Bellingham, their approach was to redevelop the waterfront district and promote healthy and dynamic waterfront economy. They wanted to improve their access for the community because it was a significant cleanup site with contamination. They restored the health of the land and water, and they reinforced the inherent qualities of each place on the waterfront, which included cultural and tribal considerations and historical area artwork. The Bellingham outcome, they today have a very dynamic waterfront. You heard earlier from the advisory committee. At a meeting in June, they shared the container village. There's just a considerable amount of activities, recreational activities for the community up there. And it's become an economic opportunity for the community as well. So local businesses have been able to invest. Operators are thriving in that area. And it's really been a community asset. The Port of Kalama, which is on the lower Columbia River, although not on the Puget Sound, is certainly on a waterfront. And they had significant dredging that needed to occur in that particular place with some cleanup. And they took the approach to dredge and clean up and develop commercial property simultaneously. They wanted to maintain and create public spaces and amenities, and they focused on the job creation that came out of this. Their outcome, they have a number of commercial spaces and a catalyst site that they started with. They have a waterfront interpretive center, the Mountain Timber Market. There is multiple commercial opportunities for people in the area who want to start a business, open a business, move a business in. And there's public access throughout the area on their waterfront through park and event space. And now I am going to turn the rest of this presentation over to James Summer.
Commissioners, thanks for having me back up. At this point in time, I'm going to take you through the architectural contract details. So on May 6th of this year, I came before you to give you a briefing on this project and give you some background and how we got to where we were. And I said I'd be back asking for an architectural contract approval. And so here I am tonight as the advisory. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on the solicitation history. I won't go through these bullet by bullet, but essentially last year, 2023, we had a capital budget that was adopted that named this as a project. We went through the process of securing an architect, and March 26th of this year, we notified EHDD of selection. Through a couple months, we did some scope negotiation, and then I'm here tonight to present to you about this contract. So I want to start by saying this contract is very in-depth. It has lots of information to it. I've tried to pick out the pertinent information for you to summarize in this presentation, but the entire 64-page scope of work has been included in your packet. And yeah, so again, just trying to give you the pertinent information tonight. No, this morning. Practice, I wouldn't say that too. So to start, it is a three-phased approach. This will give us two natural breaking points to assess the project. As we go through this presentation, I have broken out into those three phases to help make it a little bit more digestible. As we start to get to the fees for the different phases, I wanted to let you know this is based on the Washington State fee schedule, and that has also been provided for you tonight. No, this morning in your packet. I'm going to say that a bunch of times. I apologize in advance. So I'll start by getting to some assumptions. We'll work through that in phase one, but this is kind of the initial assumptions that we have. It's going to be a 3-story building, approximately 23,000 square foot of mixed use. Based on current energy code, it will be a LEED Silver project. Really, we'll be looking at responsible resource use. We do have the option to go LEED Gold, LEED Platinum. And again, that as we get through the phase one, we'll kind of make those recommendations. We have initial project budget for the building of about $17.5 million. Again, this is based on the assumptions of the 3-story, 23,000 square foot. And also a project budget of approximately $2.5 million for the site and shoreline work. As a reminder, this is not just the building. This also addresses the site and shoreline. A good example of that would be the Port Plaza. So as I mentioned, it's broken up into 3 phases, so I've attempted to do that here. So phase one is approximately 8 weeks. It will start with a market analysis and then move into pre-design and programming with a natural break. Phase two is approximately 18 weeks. It gets into schematic design and design development, again with another natural break. And then phase three, which is the longest, is approximately 23.5 months. This is where we get into the construction documents, bidding, and construction administration. You may be asking, what does that all mean? And we will get into those phases in just a few slides. But first, I want to introduce the Port of Olympia and EHDD teams. So Christopher Patano will be the principal in charge. Lynn Rieselman will be the marine science and aquarium expert. Brad Jacobson is the sustainability expert. Dan Leckman is the project architect. And Matt Fujimoto is the project manager and also a project architect. The full statement of qualifications has been provided in your packet tonight, but we just want to highlight that they have a very wide breadth of knowledge. And with a project like this, it is great to have a consultant that has the expertise to help. In addition to this, we will have StructureCraft as the structural engineer and PAE Engineering as our mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineers. And that will make up the basic services team. I also wanted to call out tonight some of our other consultants who will be part of this contract as our specialty services. Cushman Wakefield will be performing our real estate market analysis. In addition to doing the market analysis, we will be passing on interested parties who have expressed an interest to us of being part of this project. So they will be folded into that market analysis. Moffatt & Nichol is our civil engineering firm. If that name sounds familiar, as Camille pointed out, they are involved in the master planning and Bud Inlet. Groundswell is our landscape architect. They have history with EHDD when they were involved in the Percival Landing project. We have Haley and Aldrich, which was our geotechnical engineering. So essentially what they'll be doing is studying the soil and helping to inform the project, the civil engineers, the structural engineers, as to what exactly they are building on. DCW is our cost management firm. They'll just be giving us cost estimating as we go through the design. PAE engineers, as I mentioned, they are mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, but in addition to that, they will also be helping with technology design services, building performance, and energy code. And EHDD, as the architect, will also be helping with LEED documentation and administration. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And so that does start in the early planning phases, so they will be involved in that. So phase one, as I mentioned, this is a phase project. So again, it's broken out by phases. Phase one is the pre-design and programming phase. So the next few slides, I'll be talking about the deliverables we expect from this phase, an example schedule where we show our integration with the commission and the community, as well as a fee schedule. So phase one, based on commission feedback, we know that a market analysis is important to this commission. So that is part of this contract. Cushman Wakefield will be performing that, and a lot goes into that. But the two things I wanted to highlight are some of the deliverables, which would be the highest and best use study and a demand segment analysis. Also part of phase one is the pre-design and programming. At the end of that, we expect a report to come out. The things we'll be talking about in that report is the building and site program. So that's really where we start to understand what are the components of this building. Is it 2 conference room? What does the commission room look like? Some sample square footage. and as well as the site program. What do we want the site surrounding the building to look like? We'll get some initial project goals and criteria. Again, we mentioned LEED. Maybe we decide this building wants to go super energy efficient. Maybe we decide whatever other goals we want to have this, we kind of put it into this document. And as we go through the design, this becomes our guiding light. We go back and are we hitting these goals? Are we hitting the criteria that we set out when we started this? And when we have that report, it will also allow us to start looking into grant and different funding opportunities. Our consultants will help us with that. And again, once we have those defined, it really starts narrowing in where we can look at those funding opportunities. Here is an example schedule. Again, this is just a rough draft. The first 4 lines in the gray, those are kind of the technical in-house meetings. The one I really want to talk about and highlight is the commission meetings in yellow. And so this is our touch point with the commission, let you know where we're at, get feedback. And then the orange is the community meeting. And I want to stress that this is just the meetings that the consultants will be involved in. That does not mean we can't have additional meetings to discuss and get input, but these are the consultant-driven meetings. And as I mentioned, here is the phase 1 fee structure. It's broken out by the different portions of it, but the number you're probably most interested in is the total, which is approximately $129,000 for phase 1. So phase 2, this is the schematic design and design development. We use those documents that we created in phase 1, and then we start to further refine them and actually get into designing the building. The end goal of this phase is to become the term shovel ready. And what that means is that enough engineering and planning has taken place that at this point, should the funding be available, we can pretty easily move into the construction phase. And again, by being shovel ready, that allows us to start also really looking at the funding and which funding opportunities we want to go after. So some of the deliverables we expect in schematic design. One is the 100% schematic design drawings. We'll have some project renderings, a report summarizing all of our sustainability design criteria, again, that we select in phase 1. We'll have some content for and also conduct a public open house. We'll have our draft geotechnical engineering report that will help us inform the design moving forward. And we'll also have a probable construction cost, which again, helps us make sure we're following along with what we originally envisioned. So the purpose of this, again, is just to establish the overall concept and design intent. And the level of detail you can expect is general layout, some basic form and conceptual design. And here's an example. Again, this is only an example. This is not related to our project. We just wanted to show visually kind of what you could expect in the drawings. Kind of some basic layout, approximate sizes. And at this point in the design, it is very fluid. As we get feedback, this can be easily changed at this phase. And then also here is a example schedule. Again, the first couple items on there in the gray, that's kind of the internal meetings. I want to call out, again, the yellow. There's 4 touch points with the commission, as well as 2 for the community, which is highlighted in orange. So again, very community and commission involvement here in this project. Then we move into design development. So some things we expect for deliverables here is our LEED credit review and document preparation. Again, to get LEED accredited, this really starts in the planning phase and the design. We will have 100% design development drawings. We will have some memorandums from our technical staff in this contract for as we task them for their expertise. A final geotechnical engineering design report, and again, a probable cost for construction. Again, we like to get those probable costs throughout the design phase to understand the options that we have selected and what that means for the project financially. And then also at this point, some grant writing. So the purpose of this, again, just to refine the design, get some more development details and address some of the technical issues. Level of detail, this is going to be more detailed drawings, some elevation. And as an example, again, not related to this project, but an example of what you can see when you start getting into this phase. We're no longer looking at 2D downward vision of floor plans. Now we start to see what this building may or may not look like from the outside. So again, not related to the project, but just wanted to show a visual of what we expect. Design development, example schedule. Again, the gray is the in-house technical meetings, and then the orange here is another community meetings. to further discuss where we're at in the project. So phase 2 is significantly larger in scope. And so I've broken it out into phase 2A, which is the schematic design, and phase 2B, which is the design development. The total for phase 2A is approximately $404,000, and for phase 2B, approximately $493,000. And again, the goal at the end of this phase is to be that term shovel ready, which really helps us go out to the community and to our legislators and look for funding. So as I mentioned, some natural breakpoints. This is a good natural breakpoint because now we have a product. It's no longer, we may do this project. Here's kind of what we're thinking. We have something that we can go out and start soliciting from a number of different sources. There's grants, there's appropriations, private investment, local partnerships, and should the commission so decide, also bonding. And then we move into phase 3. Phase 3 is where we get construction documents. So that's the final design, the bidding process, and construction administration. And in this phase, we really lean on the expertise of our consultants to walk us through this, to make sure that we get what we have paid to design and ultimately build. So some deliverables we expect. The big ones are the 90% construction document drawings. We call this the permit set. We take this permit set and we put it in for permitting. The authority having jurisdiction will go through that. They will give us feedback, and then we will turn that into the 100% construction document drawings, also known as the bid set. It is the documents that we will actually go out to bid with. It will have full specifications. So the drawings show you what you're going to build. The project specifications tell you how you're going to build it, as well as having a full cost estimate. This is an example, again, not related to the project, but just wanted to kind of show the level of detail. Not only are we seeing the floor plan, we know the elevations, but now we get all the way into, this happens to be a mechanical drawing, where it shows, here's where your mechanical units are, here's how we get piping to them, here's how we get air moving from space to space. So again, it's the final iteration that really shows the project in its final form. Then we get into bidding. Some deliverables we expect using all of our consultants is to assist the general contractor with the bid conference. They will be responsible to respond to requests for informations. So sometimes that's something that was omitted from the design. They ask a question, we can go back and give them the response. Sometimes maybe it's just clarification of something they didn't understand. And then once we go through that bidding process, we have all those RFIs in, then we will be getting a conform set, which just basically means we take everything all the way through this process and put it into one set of drawings. Then we move into construction administration. So this is when we are actually physically building a building. So some of the deliverables we expect, again, utilizing our consultants and their expertise, is site visits and reports. How is the building coming along? Is it following the plan? Some submittal review. They will review and respond to, again, requests for information. Sometimes as they're going through the building process, questions arise, so they will respond to those. They will review and respond to contractors' punch list and back checks. So that's in case something is not going as it should. It will go on a punch list and they will be responsible for making sure it gets corrected. And at the very end, we will have a record set of drawings that this is what actually got built. So phase 3, again, is rather large. So a split is up for understanding phase 3A. This is construction documents. This is the final design process to get us to move forward. That comes in at approximately $634,000. And then phase 3B, this is once we have our capital secured, we are going to bid and actually build the building. And that comes in at approximately $579,000. And so we've talked about quite a few different phases here, some different timelines. So I wanted to put it all together in one slide for you. If we were to start today and move all the way through the project without any pauses, which we anticipate there will be, it'd be about 118 weeks worth of effort, which is a lot. And it would come in at $2,239,076. And so next steps, I will be back August 12th, I believe, to ask for an action. And these are the options that we plan to present for your consideration. So the top one would be to approve the port contract for all phases as presented for the not to exceed amount of $2,239,076. The second option would be to approve the port contract for the first two phases for not to exceed amount of $1,026,636. There is a result of doing that. The waterfront center design would move forward in stages through design development. However, we would need to come back to you for a phase 3 amendment. And there are some consequences of that, and we will get into that in more depth at the action item. And then the third is to take no action. In that case, the waterfront center design will be postponed or canceled, which may also result in a loss of appropriation funds. And so with that, I welcome question and comments for me and my two colleagues.
Any questions or comments for the
I'll
team?
keep most of it for later because I know we're out of time, but during Camille's presentation, slide 10, I just wanted to clarify for the public, I believe I'm correct in saying that the port terminal was not in the scope of Destination Waterfront, but it is in the scope of our master planning efforts. So this is a catalyst project for our entire peninsula, correct?
Yes, yes.
So just the slide says not in scope, and that was the previous destination master plan. So just so everyone's clear, we are looking at everything in this master planning, right?
That is correct. And this is one piece that would be folded into the overall Port Peninsula Master Plan, and any of the geotechnical work and the market analysis, it will be assessed and incorporated into the final master plan.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments?
I wanted to ask more about the community involvement and what those meetings would look like, how that feedback will be incorporated into the overall plan.
Absolutely. And I can work with Executive Director Alex Smith to get a more concrete answer. But essentially, the consultants will come out. They'll bring the design, whether that's printout, and kind of just walk through it. And then there will be an opportunity, from what I understand, for the community to give their feedback, which can then be taken back into those programming sessions and be considered in the design.
I think that's critical that we're incorporating that.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see if there's any public comment on the Waterfront Architectural Contract Award. Is there anyone who would like to make comment? Ms. Kuntz, you have the floor.
Thanks. Sharon Kuntz again. First, I would plead with you to slow down this process. The first slide that appalled me was very early on, not in this, but when it showed that we're spending 5% of our income on environmental assessments, or our expenses, rather, 5% of our budget. We need a lot more of your time, energy, commitment, and money going to environmental protection, given the state of the world right now, global warming, et cetera. You can slow down this process. There needs to be an entire environmental assessment, which was promised years ago of the Port Peninsula, and it's not happened yet. And I think you just have to do that because, well, let's back up. Public comment, the open house should have been number one on this list, and instead it's into the project, and that's alarming too. Did the public ask for any of this? Did 2050, some of the elements of the 2050 vision have been ignored rather strenuously, it seems to me, or completely. Science is not coming first, and that's alarming. We're seeing the same old, where we get piecemealing of projects. That's against SEPA, but it happens. So you do a little bit of a project under the umbrella of the whole project, and people say, well, that's okay, we'll do it project by project. And what that eliminates is the overall cumulative effect of everything that's done under that umbrella. And that is crucial to protecting our area. I guess I'll stop there. No, I won't. I'll tell you that we have evidence, and I'm happy to provide it to you, of some of the things the port has done in the past that completely violated not just SEPA law, but other laws too, in terms of Weyerhaeuser. Even Weyerhaeuser said, wait, the port refused to do the environmental request we wanted because they didn't want to know what was out there in terms of pollution already. Those sorts of things are alarming. they're troublesome to a great degree, and they're causing lots of problems in our world, in our seas, in our air, and in our land, and in our people. And I think we just have to stop and take a beat. Never let this stuff get rushed through. And that's what I see happening. Cart before the horse. We need to get the environmental assessment of what's there now before we start making plans of building buildings and stuff that maybe shouldn't be there. Sorry, I'm semi-articulate this evening. See, it got to me. It's your fault. It's today, but it's because I'm ill, and that brain fog thing they talk about is really true. And I apologize if I've rambled occasionally. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Coons. Is there any public comment on Zoom?
Jan Witt would like to speak.
Ms. Witt, have the floor.
Hi, I'm Jan Witt again. Also again, in 2005, Floyd Snyder, a very reputable firm, did an environmental phase 1 assessment of the Port Peninsula. And after doing that, that was basically a document study in which they studied past documents, and they determined their determination was that there was a strong likelihood of contamination on the Port Peninsula outside the confines of the Cascade Pole slurry wall. And that recommendation of that study had been that there be a phase 2 assessment of the entire Port Peninsula. And to my knowledge, a phase 2 assessment was never done. I'm wondering if any of you know if a phase 2 assessment of the entire Port Peninsula based on the finding of Floyd Snyder, which found that there was a likelihood of contamination of the soil outside of the slurry wall, if a phase 2 assessment was ever done, because I don't believe it was done. And I think that that should be the first thing that should be considered before you're considering any development on the Port Peninsula. I cannot see I cannot see the wisdom of developing property which may be found later to have contaminated soil underneath that property. And I don't think that it's wise to do a piecemeal assessment of contamination, because contamination, particularly near water, on waterfronts, it can travel. And so I'm requesting that someone please look at whether or not a phase 2 assessment was done, which would have included a look at whether or not there are sources of contamination on the Port Peninsula that may be migrating towards the water and could be underneath any development that you might that you might want. Sorry, that was not very eloquent either. I'm also not very prepared, but I wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Witt. Any other public comment on the Waterfront Center Architectural Contract Award? Is there any other Zoom?
Paula had her hand raised.
Ms. Wolfsburg, did you want to make comment?
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm back, Karen Wolfsburg. And I would like to also say that it seems to me that this environmental assessment really should precede any of this development, and also to identify any uncontrolled sources of contamination that are coming from the peninsula into the water, or any other uncontrolled sources, because if that is not identified prior to any kind of development or construction, there will never be an opportunity to control those sources. So an environmental assessment will tell us where that's happening. And I think also this issue of building on the peninsula prior to any really clear identification of sea level rise, and this concept of upland remediation, where you're going to pile up this contaminated dredge material onto the peninsula and mix it with cement, is supposed to somehow protect us from sea level rise. This really needs to have a very strong scientific evaluation. And I think that anything like that that is done, any of that upland, the so-called upland remediation with this soil will prevent any future possibilities of federal funding or other sources to actually do serious restoration of the Bud Inlet. So I think this is very backwards. And I'm sorry that the staff has had to put so much effort into this when in fact it's really not it's not in the right order of procedures. And I would like to really strongly suggest that an environmental assessment be done first and that the public be allowed to comment first as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfsburg. Or any other public comment?
Jan Witt's raised her hand again, but she's already given her 3 minutes. No other people have raised their hand.
Ms. Witt, did you want to make more comment? You want to have something else to say?
I only wanted to say that if any of you would like a copy of that phase 1 assessment by Floyd Snyder that indicates likelihood of contamination outside of the slurry wall, I'd be glad to provide those and other documents to you.
All right, thank you.
Let me know. Thanks.
Is that it for public comment? All right, well, as we head into the evening hours, let's take a moment and take a short break. Does 5 minutes work for everybody? All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Sorry, I just. Yeah, it's a long. Have a s'more.
Are we recording? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, does anybody object to allowing the OCAC update to go next? It's been sitting here a while. Sorry, is that okay, Warren? Okay, so we're gonna skip up to agenda item number 3, Port of Olympia Citizens Advisory Committee update.
Or you can leave it there.
Like we have Director of Strategic Initiatives and Commission Affairs,
Well, hello again.
Camille St. Ange.
Yes,
Floor.
Camille St. Ange, it's a pleasure to be here with you this morning again, and I'm going to be discussing our Citizens Advisory Committee with you today. Let me find the, oh, thanks so much. So today's briefing is advisory. I'm not asking for any action today. However, we'll be coming back to you August, either as an action agenda or a consent agenda item to talk about, to ask for action on the POCAC related to policy updates and a subcommittee proposal. I'm going to begin today with a resolution and operating rules overview for you. Just for a little bit of background, the POCAC was expanded to up to 17 members roughly two years ago. And when that expansion took place, it's my understanding that the staff at the time knew that they needed to think about the structure of the advisory committee at that time, and it was folded into the position that I hold today to restructure or make recommendations for a structural adjustment. So I come to you with over a decade of public involvement experience with the Department of Ecology, and took that experience and evaluated best practices for advisory committees at the local level, including effective meeting operation and work plan assignments. I reached out to my counterpart at the City of Olympia and to get some feedback on local expertise on how they've been managing their advisory committees, which is 12. They have 12 standing separate advisory committees running at any given time. Had a nice lengthy discussion with Kelly Braithwaite about their approach and took that information, and it has informed what we're looking at today. I also gathered feedback from all of you through various conversations and briefings. I talked with our staff, and I worked with our POCAC members considerably. All of those meetings have gone into this draft review. I'll go into a little bit more about the work session that we had at work group and work session we had with the commission. And just as a reminder, I came to you in March and to gather some feedback on some approaches and some considerations. And we had a work session with the POCAC in June. So I want to begin with an update to the resolution. So the resolution today really has what I consider some administrative changes that I want to just cover with you quickly. One, it expands the ways to meet with the commission. Currently, the resolution says the POCAC should be providing information to you in a joint meeting. And we're proposing that it can be a joint meeting, at a regular business meeting, or at a work session. It also incorporates exhibits for roles, expectations, and operating rules into the resolution, along with a couple of recommendations from the POCAC that gives you more flexibility in what kind of products can be developed, rather than being very specific about develop one type of product. They have a list of many, and you could think of other products that they could develop outside of the resolution examples. I want to highlight from Exhibit A that I provided in the commission packet, some of the different information I've incorporated into roles and expectations, which includes open government training for each of our advisory committee members. It's free. It's through the Attorney General's office. In the rules, roles and expectations, we call out to align their work with the strategic initiatives and the mission and vision of the port. We include at the advisory committee's request ethics information, so conflict of interest, and also who speaks on behalf of the port to media. And then it outlines the role for staff liaisons. The operating rule highlights, which is Exhibit B, adds a meeting minute requirement. There wasn't a meeting minutes requirement before there, and so we've incorporated that along with defining the process for minority opinions so that we know that we can bring minority opinions in reports and recommendations. It also includes a subcommittee election process. There wasn't a process before, and so the idea behind the operating rules is this helps for the long-term life of the POCAC beyond the people that are there today, moving into years to come. And it provides a meeting process for subcommittees, officers, minutes, and publishing agendas online for the community to see what our advisory committees are working on. POCAC did have a working meeting, so I want to share that with you so you know that their input was incorporated into the materials that we're presenting today. And we talked in April, we talked about best practices. They worked through the operating rules. They broke out into work groups. They had breakout groups. They had a scribe at each of the breakout group, and they documented any changes, recommendations, weaknesses, strengths, and provided all of that information to me. They also held what we call a sticky note interactive voting. I'm sorry, do you have would you like me to pause to ask a question?
Thank you. We are running pretty late, and we have, I am thinking through this agenda and that there's still another item, and whether we can make a choice on how we manage this meeting. Mr. Chair, Mr. President.
There is privilege motion you can make.
Sorry, point of privilege?
Privilege if you want. I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can make a privilege motion if you'd like.
Can we make a motion to hear from the POCAC people, continue this conversation also at the next commission meeting? And I also would like to address the Panattoni issue. Four of us will miss something that we were driving up specifically to attend if we don't get to an end of this meeting quickly.
Okay, I'll be happy to just run through these two options and turn it over to our advisory committee members. I don't know, Commissioner Ayala, if you have to take a vote or on how to do that, or.
There hasn't been a motion made, so I'm not taking a vote on that.
Okay, sorry, just trying to make sure. All right, so the POCAC has two subcommittee proposals for you. One being 3 subcommittees: Bud Inlet Environmental Cleanup and Revitalization, Destination Waterfront, and Economic Development. The other option is
Make a motion. I would like to make a motion that we table the rest of this presentation except for the guests that have attended today. So I'm making a motion to table the rest of this presentation except for the guests. Or I'm sorry, members of the public.
There we go.
We have a motion.
Thank you.
We have a motion to table the rest of this presentation and bring up the POCAC members. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I'm trying to be responsive to my fellow commissioner and recognize that we have other business that needs to be accomplished today. In respect of all of the guests that have attended.
So I don't, just to clarify, I don't think we need a formal motion to have the presentation stop. You can move to table the presentation until indefinitely or to a certain date.
Can we just consider it concluded and that we can all be up to date based on the packet, and then this can come before the commission at the next meeting and as an action item,
I
as
think all we really have to do is get
Yes.
consent by the commission and we can just go ahead and do that.
Let's
Okay.
do it.
So we've had a motion, we've had a second.
So it's not tabled, though. We don't want to table it. We want to be done with it and for it to come back as action in the next meeting.
Terrific.
Yes, does everyone agree with that?
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Joel Hanson, Chair of the Port Citizens Advisory Committee. With me is Deb Patton, who is the immediate past chair, and someone who has quite a bit of institutional knowledge, and she's been a POCAC for quite a while. First of all, I want to thank the staff for the work that they've done, and I hope that you do look at the presentation at your leisure, particularly Missy and Camille and Sean and Jonathan. I think they've done good work in the process, and I want to recognize that. We have taken a vote as the POCAC. Our recommendation from our committee is that you authorize the formation of 3 subcommittees. One exists today, Destination Waterfront, and I think you've seen the work that they've been doing at the business meeting last month. We want to form a second subcommittee to support the work of the Director of Environmental Programs and Projects, if I got that title right, and the work on the restoration and cleanup and sampling and all of that work in Butt Inlet. We want to have a committee to support that work, and I believe that staff is in favor of that as well. And then third, it was the recommendation of the POCAC that you authorize the formation of an economic development subcommittee. There are members of our advisory group that have specific expertise in this area and are really eager to help support the port by investigating opportunities that may arise, and also looking back at previous projects that the POCAC has engaged in the past and reports that they've submitted, looking at those with fresh eyes. And I think Debbie could speak to that more eloquently.
He's so tall and I'm so short. Just very briefly, and we could talk about this in August if there's time, but regarding the economic development, if you go back to some of the previous reports that the POCAC has prepared, we had one on port cargo background back in 2017. We had one on marina marketing in 2018. And then we had evaluation of non-motorized or shared transportation options in 2022. And my understanding is none of those have been voted on or approved by the commission. So I'd like to you to consider pulling them up, looking at them, and then we could they could go back to the POCAC. We could revise them, update them based on changes that you were talking about earlier, and then the commission could vote on them, and that could be part of the work of the Economic Development POCAC subcommittee. Thank you.
And I could give just an example from my experience there. The POCAC once did a study on, prepared a paper for the commission about solar on the Olympia Airport. And I work for a company in my day job that we've done solar projects at Boston Logan Airport, at the Minneapolis St. Paul Airport. I recently wrote a grant to put a microgrid at Palos Airport. And I know that there are things in that report that were challenges presented to the commission that are no longer true. And so being able to look at some of these past reports with fresh eyes, understanding the current landscape, could provide good information to the commission to make decisions around economic development. I'll keep it short. I'll keep it there unless you have questions, because I know our time is limited.
Questions or comments for?
Thanks for hanging in there, guys.
Yeah.
Again, just want to thank the staff. They've done good work.
And thank you guys for the work you've done. So public comment, is there any public comment on the POCAC update? Anyone on Zoom?
No raised hands on Zoom.
All right, then our final advisory calendar item is the option to ground lease Fifth Amendment.
I'd like to make a motion that we put this on action other at our next meeting. I know we typically don't do things as action other because that means the briefing will be the same day as the vote, but it's a pretty straightforward amendment and I'd like us to move it to next meeting. Mr. Chair, point of personal motion.
Okay. So there is a motion to move option to ground lease Fifth Amendment to our next commission meeting as an action other item. Is there a motion or a second, excuse me?
If I may, Commissioner, we have the Senior Development Manager of Panattoni has been present throughout the entire meeting, Len Syke, and also online is Brenda Fodge, Development Manager of Panattoni. So I offer that.
And I'm not hearing a second, so we will continue. So go right ahead. No, you're looking for a, there we go.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioners. And thank you. This has been an ambitious profile and agenda today. So thank you for the time and the attention that you've spent on a multitude of issues that the staff has spent a great deal of time working on. Warren Hendrickson, Director of Operations, here to discuss the option to ground lease Fifth Amendment of Panattoni at the New Market Industrial Campus. Again, I do wish to introduce who's present personally in the audience is Len Syke, the Senior Development Manager of Panattoni Development Company. He's available to answer questions that you may have perhaps at the end of the presentation. And also online is Brenda Fodge, the Development Manager of Panattoni. And these are the two individuals, myself and Clarita Maddox, our Real Estate Senior Manager, and Chris Bellini of Airport Senior Manager have been working with most closely. Today's presentation is advisory only, no action is required. It addresses the New Market Industrial Campus adjacent to Olympia Regional Airport. It is related to the Habitat Conservation Plan. And the specific agreement that is being considered is the Panattoni option to ground lease agreement and an amendment thereto. The option to ground lease agreement was executed between the Port and Panattoni Development Company in July of 2020. The legal entity in that agreement is SSECC PDC, LLC. It includes 199 acres in New Market Industrial Campus. It is a high-quality business park is the intent, and its mixed use includes commercial, business, and light industrial use. The area in magenta outlines the area of the 199 acres. Roughly, it lies between Center Street and I-5 as the east and west borders in Tumwater, south of Tumwater Boulevard and north of 83rd Avenue. All but 29 plus acres is subject to the Bush Prairie Habitat Conservation Plan approval by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The option agreement also includes a due diligence period for the developer to comprehensively evaluate the feasibility of developing the option premises. Individual New Market Industrial Campus parcels are expected to be developed over time, and the option term remains in effect until July 12th of 2031. Completion of the Habitat Conservation Plan is a joint Port City of Tumwater responsibility. There is no responsibility on the part of Panattoni for that agreement. Initial option to ground lease agreement anticipated that the completion would occur within 24 months of lease execution, 2022. We are now clearly 2 years plus beyond that anticipated closure date. HCP final approval has incurred significant delays, quite obviously. And the most recent option agreement amendment of March of 2023 extended the due diligence period and the HCP completion date until August 31st of this year. A further extension, therefore, will be required. That is the purpose of the Fifth Amendment. The Port Panattoni history is shown right here, multiple dates, multiple items. Each one that is marked with an asterisk has already received previous commission approval, including each of the 4 amendments and approval to the lease forms. The Fifth Amendment grants an additional 6-month extension to the process. Amendments 2, 3, and 4 each previously extended the HCP completion date. Amendment 4 anticipated a completion date again no later than August 31st of this year. The new amendment number 5 will extend the due diligence and HCP completion dates to February 28th, 2025. The language of the Fifth Amendment is identical to the Fourth Amendment, except for the dates. It has been approved and reviewed by Port Counsel Chris Pierce-Wright. What is it not? The commission approval of the option of ground lease agreement amendment is not commission approval of a ground lease.
The effect of the action is simply to extend the due diligence period to accommodate ACP completion. And all future amendments and ground leases under this option agreement will be subject to separate commission actions at the appropriate time. The next step will be on August 12th at a regular commission meeting will be an action item to authorize the executive director to execute the option to ground lease Fifth Amendment, extending the due diligence and ACP completion dates to February 28, 2025. And with that, I'll entertain any questions and comments.
Questions or comments for Warren? Or any of the attendees?
Warren, would you say that the HCP completion date still is not completely in our hands, although we work effectively to try to negotiate with Fish and Wildlife? So the 6-month extension gives us time to continue working with Panattoni towards agreement on a number of things, including that there is potentially revenues being realized from the option to ground lease for the ground parcels that are currently already moving forward because they're not under the HCP.
There are two parts to that question in my answer. The first one is that the port staff will continue to work with Panattoni Development Company as it always has on a case-by-case basis moving forward throughout the agreement and looking at the possibilities for all of Newmarket. And secondly, the ACP, that's a port and city responsibility with the city of Tumwater. And we do continue, yes, to move that ball forward as best we can, actively and in a period of continuous engagement with Fish and Wildlife Service. So yes, to both of those points.
All right, any other questions, comments? Let's move to public comment then. Is there any public comment on the option to ground lease Fifth Amendment Panattoni Newmarket Industrial Campus? Any on Zoom? No raised hands on Zoom. All right, thank you very much, Warren. We'll move on then to commissioner reports and discussion. Anybody want to go first? Does anybody want to go at all?
My quote of the day, learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference. Marcus Aurelius.
All right. Mr. Vasavada, anything?
I'm excited to hit the road.
All right, hit the road. Commissioner Sanders, anything?
Yes, I'm excited to go to the WPPA Commissioners Conference, so I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Commissioner Tom.
Ditto to that, and I did want to say that the Thurston County Chamber's AI forum was very informative. They had some really great information last week.
Yes, it was very good. And I will just say I very much enjoyed the summer night at the port and whatever that band was. Shelter. Shelter.
They were awesome.
They were very good. And Commissioner Tong did a great job opening up that night. And it was clear she was having a wonderful time. So great to see. Let's see, any other business?
We've talked about this before, but there's been staff turnover. If at all possible, without disrupting the process, having guests appear at the further, and we might need to consult with legal counsel about this based on how our agendas are structured, but so the guests can go at the beginning of the agenda, so having to sit through her. If we can just have an eye towards that. Thank you all for your patience, but that was a long meeting.
Anything else, other business? No. Okay, meeting announcements.
All right. It's coming up. All right, we've got a regular commission meeting on August 12th, 5:30 here in this building. Same for September 9th. And then there's a commission work session on Monday, September 16th at 3:30 p.m. Please note for those who normally follow the report that August, we only have one commission meeting. It's on the 12th. We don't have a second regular business meeting. And then the Citizens Advisory Committee meets at 6 p.m. on November 17th. And just thanks everybody for hanging in there today. It was a long day.
All right. Not that I could hold you here any longer. This meeting is officially adjourned.